All right, guys, my thoughts of the Master Duel format post the new Forbidden list that just dropped out. There were some really big changes that I think people really need to adhere to. Tillim Sugi to 1 is huge. The Floowandereeze Imp into 1 is huge. And then there's some other changes. I'm going to be able to address what I think the rest of the format's going to be until we get our newest selection pack. Let's go ahead and start off with Abyss Actors. This is a deck 100% takes a great pilot. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and say good enough to steal W's. I don't think that this deck is necessarily good by itself. But since players don't read Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and these are pendulum cards, and they require a lot of text, I think you'll be able to steal quite the few W's because of this card. Adamantipator, I still think is one of the best decks in Master Duel. Did not get hit by the Forbidden list whatsoever. This rock deck still has Block Dragon, which is still extremely powerful. Branded, I'm actually going to have to drop it down. We've talked about how Branded did get less consistent with cards like Aluber and Branded opening going into 2. I think that trend does follow, and it goes from a top deck to a really good deck. We don't have the new Dogmatica monster that does come out very, very soon. Once we get that Dogmatica monster, we probably could consider this back into the top deck range. But a lot of this deck is now going to be built on using Blazing Cartesia to be able to fusion summon, because that is 1 less or 3 less copies of Branded Fusion with the absence of 1 Aluber, 1 Branded opening, and now 1 Branded Fusion. Blue Eyes, guys, same thing. Like, these two decks they go hand in hand. The Bestial monsters are extremely powerful right now, so being able to banish a monster that wants to be summoned with Eternal Soul is really huge. And then Brick Eyes White Dragon, if you can resolve Skill Drain, I mean, you're doing well, probably. But the problem with that is that Skill Drain is winning you the game. That's going to be a really powerful card, but I don't think for the Blue Eyes deck. Dino 100% takes a really good pilot. This has been a very disappointing strategy because in Master Duel, this deck has 3 Miscellaneous Eris, and that's really huge. You would think that that would make it a top contender, but unfortunately, that's not it for Dino. It still does have a lot of pieces that are missing, and with everybody playing Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, hitting the Miskin Graveyard is actually huge. Dogmatica, I think, is strong enough to take some W's simply because of its gimmicky mechanic, being able to play the Nightmare Corruptor Ibly, which is like it give you a free win against a lot of decks in the card game. I think that that's really powerful, but also being able to rip your opponent's extra deck can be really, really, really beneficial to you. So that's what I think about Dogmatica. This is probably the best deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! The TCG and Master Duel, Dragons have cemented themselves as one of the best strategies simply because the Bestial monsters not only check some of the top decks in the entire game, but Branded Regain is a bannable Yu-Gi-Oh card. I'm serious. Branded Regain is one of the best cards ever printed in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, and it has some ridiculous effects, and it only gets worse when more Bestial monsters come out. Exo Sister 100% takes a really good pilot. You would think that in the format with Bestial monsters, these would be... Oh, I'm thinking TCG. What am I playing? It is good. The TCG does have Bestials. I don't think it's that good. The TCG does have Bestials, but the TCG does also have strategies that aren't graveyard reliant. Exo Sister in a best of 1 format with Bestials being run around can take advantage. And of course, since it is best of 1, you get those sacky cards like Dimension Shifter and Dimension Fissure, which could catch your opponent off guard. I think it's good enough to steal W's. Floowandereeze, I'm not ready to abandon on Floowandereeze just yet. I don't think that it's completely terrible. But with 1 Floowandereeze Impin in 1 map, I believe their spell card, which is Advinity Adventure, is also hit on the list. I'm trying to remember if it's at 2 or 1. I can't remember right now. But regardless, either one of those does make the deck a lot less consistent. It makes his plays a lot lower. More importantly, I don't think that the deck's bad because Rise of the Mega Monarch is still really, really good. So is Miss Valley Apex Avion. But I think that the deck is going to start maybe looking towards Snowl to be able to counter boards and flip opponent's monsters face down. Furhire, I think Furhire is really good. I think Furhire Adventure Sprite is probably post-ban list the better of the Adventure Sprite decks. And it's because it's not ultra reliant on the Sprite cards, and it's not ultra reliant on the Runic cards, and it can draw a ton of cards to get into those to make up for the deficiencies of having so many Sprite and Runic cards at 2. I think that it's really, really good. Goaty, well, the dream is dead, guys. Goaty takes a really good pilot. A lot of fish players, they said, I think we all agree to this, Goaty needs that extra fish card that makes it really, really good. Until then, it's a deck that does struggle in Master Duel right now. Ice J, like, you do so much just to get a worse skill drain. It's crazy. Like, this deck is just, don't play it. It's not great. Labyrinth. So right now, Labyrinth takes a really good pilot, but we do have Labyrinth, new Labyrinth cards coming out. And when those new Labyrinth cards come out, I believe Labyrinth will be a top Yu-Gi-Oh deck. But for right now, for the rest of the format, Labyrinth is in 100% takes a really good pilot category. It's a underwhelming deck at times that doesn't do enough, and Ash Blossom really kills this deck. Madolche, I think Madolche is decent enough to still W's. I love Madolche Queen Tiramisu, its non-targeting removal, and I think that may be good enough to just being able to OTK. And going second, OTK build of Madolche, I think is probably the best way to go. Marine Test, I would still say, is really good. Water-supported Cyber's deck with a ton of hand traps. This is a solid Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that you can play, and has been always a solid Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that you can play in Master Duel. Heroes are 100% good enough to still W's because of Master Duel Dark Claw, as well as Destiny Hero Plasma. Both of those cards deserve honorable mentions. If you were to ask me, hypothetically, if we take gyms out of the equation, Heroes are just a better Exosister. And the reason why I say this is because Exosister punishes graveyard play, so do Heroes. Exosister has abilities to be able to play on your opponent's turn, so do Heroes. But Heroes actually have a skill tree, which Destiny Hero Plasma is a game-ending card for a lot of card strategies. Mathmech probably isn't a take a good pilot, because players are playing so many Bestials. Having your Mathmech cards hit by the Bestials makes it really bad. But fortunately enough, we know Marine Test is probably the best Cyber strategy. So Cyber's players just move on to Marine Test. The Melfi Sprite deck, I think that it's still good in the West. I think Melfi Sprite is still good. The deck is still really, really powerful. It's losing Sprite Jet and Swap Frog. Swap Frog is, some builds don't play Swap Frog. But losing Sprite Jet it's a hit and it's going to hurt, but it's not going to be too problematic. These Melfi cards actually can be explored a little bit more, and there's some crazy combos with it. Naturia, I'm going to say really good still. Naturia goes crazy, and Naturia probably will be a top deck once Labyrinth comes out, because it does have access to Naturia Barkion, but against other decks like Branded and stuff, it has access to Naturia Beast. And then it has the graveyard manipulation with the Ishizu cards. This deck actually it's in a pretty decent spot, and I think it only gets better. Plunder Patrol, I think, is good enough to still W's. I don't think that this is a crazy great deck. It is a solid Runic deck if you decide to go that route. And it's a great Kaiju deck if you decide to go that route. But overall, I think it's a very, very solid Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Blackwings, for some reason, aren't on here, but I would say Blackwings are probably good enough to still W's. The deck is making the double 4 Armor Master, where, decks like Dragons need to play multiple monster effects. You can just straight out win off of that. I think it's good enough to still W's. Punk, Punk has been disappointing. Even with Chaotic Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon, I think Punk has been fairly disappointing as a pure deck and needs more to it, which is kind of crazy. There's been so many hits in the TCG that didn't happen in Master Duel, the biggest one being Chaotic Ruler, that the Punk strategy could take advantage of, but hasn't. So it's really weird to see it out here. Rika's Forever, goated. This strategy is it's extremely good. Yeah, Punk as an engine is ridiculous, but Punk is a strategy, is a complete, it's whatever. Foxy, I'm pretty sure she's gotten a Masters with Tyr, or well, not with Tyr, with Rika. The deck is just really, really good. It's very versatile, and as a best of one, being able to break your opponent's boards is so valuable. Scareclaw, I would say, takes a good pilot. I don't think that this deck does anything necessarily ridiculously good. And even the future support has you push away from Scareclaw, which is very unfortunate because the deck is aesthetically pleasing. Pure Sprite. I still think Pure Sprite may be good enough to still W's. It's not the best strategy in the room if you're playing a Pure Sprite build. With all of the hits that have just happened, Totally Awesome has been banned. Swap Frog is semi-limited now. You got Jet and Blue that are semi-limited. Pure Sprite is objectively worse than the other Sprite variants, but still good enough to win games. Swordsoul is, I mean, this deck, when will this deck just stop? It's a very, very good Master Duel deck that plays hand traps consistently well. Tier Limit is still a top deck. I think Sulyeek being hit is huge. Like, Sulyeek being hit is one of the best hits that Konami has done to address tier limits, and I think that it's bigger. I think that this deck is a top deck, but it will start to go down very, very soon. This strategy will not be the dominant deck. It'll still be a great deck. It won't be a dominant deck. And I actually do enjoy the hits that Master Duel has done. Therion Punk, I think, is better than Pure Punk, but still struggles as a overall strategy, right? It's not, it just doesn't do enough. Like, Therion King Regulus is great. Being able to summon Psychic and Punisher is great, but it doesn't do enough. And lastly, Tri-Brigade, 100% Xbox crossplay off. This deck has not existed for a very long time. And it's really unfortunate because there are some cool cards and some cool things you can do with this deck. But as a pure deck, bad. As a Tri-Brigade Sprite deck, good. It's a pretty good deck to steal W's. But to be honest with you, if you're playing Sprite, you probably would be better off playing another strategy. I'm going to say it's good enough to steal W's, even though you would be better off playing another strategy. Now, there's a couple of strategies that I talked about, like Black Wings, that are on this list. I think Spriggans are taking a good pilot. You do have a Soul Charge, but that's kind of all the deck has going to it. Like, really? Like, it's decent. It can play really well. And that's all that I have for the Master Duel tier list. Post the new Forbidden list. Of course, if you guys liked what you've seen in this content, you already know what to do with that subscribe button. But also, if you want to see more amazing content, be sure to check out these videos, and I'll catch you on the next one.